In the last video, we got started with setting up our Interact component for our VR Shooter plugin. And right now this doesn't do a whole lot. It allows for us to pick up, move around objects throughout the environment. And while this is all well and good, this isn't really useful for our specific purposes of creating a shooter plugin. So in this video, I want to start taking that a step further and being able to actually interact with the things that we pick up, such as being able to shoot projectiles and being able to possibly even reload our weapons when they run out of ammo. But before we jump into this video, you might notice I'm wearing a VR Playground shirt. This shirt will be going on sale at vrpstudios.com/store. This should be up on sale by the time that this video comes out, so if you'd like to help support the channel, that would be a great way to help do so, and you get to represent VR Playground a little bit as well. With that, let's go ahead and jump right into it and start setting up our shooter. Before we get too far into our Interact component or anything like that, there's going to be a couple things that we want to do to our BP base player. Actually, no, we'll do this first. And what we want to do here is we want to, I know originally I said in the last video, it's not such a bad thing if you want to swap weapon, you know, whatever hand is carrying the cube or anything like that. And for the most part, that is perfectly fine. But there is one issue that can come up, especially if you're dealing with single-handed weapons and things like that, and when they need to be reloaded. And that is when we go to grab, for example, a mag out of a gun. So let's say we have just like a simple pistol, we grab our mag, there's the insert stage, and there's not really much of a problem there. When we have to go to pull it back out, there's the possibility that our hand will actually detect the gun instead of the magazine. And so we want to make sure that we're going to ignore that gun if it is already being held. And fortunately, that's a very simple thing. You might remember we have the holding component variable in the Interact component. So what we can do is just get the holding component. I'm actually going to convert this to validated get. In case you're curious, this is in the grip function as well. I don't think I clarified that. So we're in the grip function. We're here in the for each loop. And we simply want to check to make sure that this is not valid. Obviously, if you want to, you can just pass the holding component, check to see if it is valid instead of doing a get. That works perfectly fine as well, but I don't know. I just like doing this. To me, it just makes a little more sense. Perfect. Also, I think it's just a little less code, which I think just makes it look a little bit cleaner. Perfect. So that's all that we need to do here to our grip. Now, there is one more thing that we have to do, and that is we obviously need to have a button we can press for the interaction. And this is going to come in a couple stages here. So let's first create our input. I'm going to create two. Actually, I think I can just duplicate these. Let me see here. IAXR trigger left and trigger right. Perfect. Let me just, I don't think I need to do anything to these. Well, yeah, perfect. And then in our XR mapping context, we obviously want to map these two buttons. So let me, why is that not coming up? Okay, I'm not really sure why that's not coming up. I know I'm trying to give it an input action, but it's not letting me give it one. That is so weird. I've never, okay, well, I guess we can drag and drop it in. That's not too bad. So let me just drag and drop both those in. Perfect. Okay, I didn't need to create a second one of those. And then, I think I mentioned this before, I'm only dealing with the Oculus controllers right now. So I'm only going to worry about that, and I'll worry about, inputs for everything else later. So let me see, Oculus, this is the right one. So we want Oculus right trigger. And I don't think it needs to be trigger axis. I think trigger will work just fine. And then same thing for the left one, Oculus touch. Obviously, if you're using a different controller, if you want to support more controllers, you'll add those in. And I'm going to later, but right now I'm just trying to make sure everything works. And so I'm just going to stick with the basics for what I need currently. And we'll leave that alone. What is going on here? XR mapping, wait, why is it still having issues? I'm not really sure why this is having issues. Validate assets. Okay, maybe that'll fix it. Hold on. Maybe not. I'm not really sure. Okay, I'm not really sure what's going on here, to be honest. I don't have anything else open, so I'm not quite sure what's going on. I'm going to assume that this is going to keep working, and if it doesn't, I will come back later on with whatever is going on here. Perfect. Let's go ahead. IA XR trigger left, and we're also going to grab our IA XR trigger right. Perfect. And that should be good. I want to double check one thing. Yes, perfect. I want to make sure our left and right grab are being basically disabled. All right, so when we do all of our interactions, there's generally going to be two states to our interaction. There's going to be a start and there's going to be an end. And I'm saying this because this is useful for especially automatic weapons where we might want to continue shooting for a period of time. So what I want to do is in our interact component, because we do need to do a couple things here before we can do anything, I'm going to create two event dispatchers. I'm going to call one on interact begin, and I'm going to call one on interact end, okay? We're not going to do anything with those just yet. I'm just going to set those. And then over here in our variables, I should have one for grip. Yep, there we go, left, get both of these, get, perfect. And awesome. So coming over here, what we want to do, I want to convert this to validated get, and then this is going to run on both start and completed. And in case you're curious about the difference between these two, the reason these two are different, actually, you know what? I just realized I set these to triggered. These are not supposed to be to triggered. These are supposed to be on start. That was a mistake. I just realized I made. In case you're curious, so let me explain the difference between these while I'm setting these up. So started is going to occur right at the beginning when we hit that button. Triggered is going to occur basically while that button is being held. And then completed is going to run once that button is finally let go. So because we have the interact component stored here, of course, we first want to make sure they're valid. And then we want to run on interact begin. And this is going to be a call. And this one is going to call on interact end. And then same thing down here for our grab, or for our right trigger. On interact begin. That was the wrong thing. That was a bind, not a call. Call on interact begin, perfect. And then call on interact end, perfect. And I'm just gonna, actually let me minimize these first, and then I'm going to comment these out. Interact, perfect. Just keep that nice and simple. Make sure everything is good, perfect. Now, that's our player all set up, nice and simple. There's not really a whole lot that needs to be done there. Now, coming over here to our interact component, there's actually gonna be a couple things we need to do. One of them was actually a mistake that I, again, made. First, we want to run on release, okay? And we want to create a binding here. And what we want to do is, once we've created this binding, I'm going to create a custom event, released, perfect. And what I want to do is on this release, I'm going to set holding component to false, or not to false, to null. And doing this will allow for our grab and release to work correctly, because we want to make sure that this gets reset back to null every single time. So when we go to grab our gun a second time, we're able to actually grab it. It's not already set. That might make a little bit of sense, hopefully. Because we want to make sure that our holding component is not being held in our player. One more thing I'm actually going to do as well. So there is a potential possibility where a player might hold down a trigger on, say, an automatic weapon and then kind of release it, that gun might continue firing, and we don't want that to happen. So we're also going to call our on interact end here as well. And this is just going to make sure that if we're doing any sort of interaction with the object that we are currently holding, that will end the moment that we release it. because we don't want that to continue on. Perfect. I think we are all set here. We got our mapping context, all that. Awesome. Now let's go ahead and jump into our interactable here. Now, we could just modify the grab cube. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to create a child blueprint class, and I'm going to call this firearm. Okay. So this is going to be a child of the grab cube. So let's go ahead and open this up. So the nice thing about this, obviously this is already set up so we can grab it and pick it up however we would like. So we already have that done. We don't need to do anything here in our event graph, which is nice and simple. There is one quick change that I do want to make. I do want to give this a proper mesh. So let me come over here. I think I have like a pistol mesh or something. Pistol, well, I have one that's like split into several small parts. And gun, here we go. I'm gonna go with this one. So we got our gun, awesome. And that's gonna work just fine. Actually, that's got the wrong material though. Close that. There we go. Okay, now we have the right material there. Nice and simple. Okay. So now that we have that out of the way, let's go ahead and actually make our gun fire. So if we come over here into our interact component, we're going to do an on interact begin, and then we're also going to grab our on interact end. We're not going to do anything. Actually, maybe we have enough time to do this. Let's go ahead and do this. So I'm gonna come over here into interactables, and what I want to do, I'm just going to keep it right here in this folder. I'm going to create an enumeration, and I'm going to call this just enum underscore firearm setting. Okay, that's what we are going to call it. So we're going to have our single fire. We're going to have our burst, and then we are also going to have our automatic. Okay, I'm not going to worry too much. Yeah, I think that's fine. Perfect. So what we want to do, let's first create our variable using that. So firearm setting, this needs to be public, and firearm setting, perfect. And then let me go and compile and save that. We'll leave it on single for now. And I do also want to just put that in its own category there so we can easily find it. Perfect. Let's go ahead and come right on up here. And I'm going to do, yeah. Let me go ahead and put this into a select, not a select, a switch. Okay. So switch is very nice, it's very useful. It allows for us to choose which execution pin we want to run depending on what setting we want in our enum. So this is nice and simple, it's not overly complicated or anything like that. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a function called fire. Actually, I'll call it spawn projectile, okay? I think that makes a little more sense. That is the wrong button there, projectile. Perfect. We'll come back to that in a second. So over here, on single, we simply want to spawn that projectile once, okay? Nice and simple. On burst, we obviously want to spawn this a certain number of times. So there's actually a very simple timer that we can run to make this happen. So I'll run a set timer by event. No, not by event. Set timer by function name, okay? That's not right either. No, I think it is set timer by events, okay? Okay, I'm doing this completely wrong. I'm like really overthinking this. Okay, I was wrong, set timer by function name. Okay, so let's go ahead. What we want to do here, first off, we need our function name. So that's going to be spawn projectile, just like that. We want to make sure that it matches up with our function name over here. And then when we run the set timer by function name, we want to run this on a loop first and foremost. And then we want to run this for a certain amount of time, okay? So we don't want the fire to be like consecutive. We want there to be some delay usually. So I'm actually going to promote this to another variable. I'm going to call this burst delay. Actually, I'll call this fire delay. I think that makes a little more sense because we can reuse this for the automatic as well. And I'm actually going to put this into the config as well. Nice and simple. We want this to be looping. I will set this to max once per frame. And the reason I'm doing this is not all the time, but there might be the possibility. For now, I'm just going to set this up as just a simple hit fire. We're going to spawn a line trace and that's going to be it. But if we do too many line traces in one frame, or if we try spawning too many projectiles in one frame, that can actually cause some performance issues. So I'm going to leave this as checked because I don't want to fire more than one bullet a frame. Not that this should happen anyways, but I want to make sure that that is not going to happen. Also, I'm saying fire delay there to 0.1. Initial start delay, I'll leave as 0. We don't really need to do anything there. Last thing I'm going to do though is I'm going to promote our return value to a variable, and I'm going to make that a timer. I forgot to make that public. And then I don't know if I want to put this in the same category here. I think I might want to call this something different. Let's do fire info. Actually, I'll call this projectile info. Perfect. We can reuse that for other stuff later. And the reason I'm creating that timer is we can come over here. Is valid timer handle. Perfect. So we want to pass this into a branch, and then assuming this is false, then we want to fire again. We don't want to obviously continue firing over and over and over again. That might be a bit of an issue. So just something I'm going to do there. Perfect. Okay. And then automatic is going to be the same thing, generally speaking. So what I'm going to do on automatic, yeah, we'll do this. We'll basically do the same thing. Set timer by function name. Again, I'm going to call this spawn projectile. I'll just go and refeed the fire delay in there. Again, looping once per frame. And then I'm also going to set the timer over here to there. Okay, and the reason we're doing it this way, I'll show you right now. When we come down here to on interact end, for the most part, we're not really going to want to do anything. So I'm going to just feed that into a switch. We don't really need to do anything on single. We don't really need to do anything on burst. Both of those, you shouldn't be possibly able to fire on those. But what we can do on automatic is we can come down here to our timer, get that, and then we can invalidate. Actually, we want to clear and invalidate the timer by handle. And we can do that on automatic, and that'll simply disable our timer. I'm actually going to remove these two because I just remembered these were up here when I was looking up here. So I'm going to move all this up a little bit. Okay. And then I don't think we need to have tick enabled, just while I'm remembering that because I removed the tick there. Perfect. So that's everything that we need here for our event graph. Now we need to work on actually spawning our projectile. And this again can kind of take two states. So I'm actually going to create one more enum over here. Actually, no, I'm not going to do it this way. Let me delete that. I have a better way of doing this. Okay, so we'll go ahead and come over here into our spawn projectile. And what I want to do is I want to actually create a new blueprint class of type actor. We'll call this debug underscore projectile. Okay. And then I'm actually just going to create a projectile movement. And then I'm going to create a static mesh. We'll just do a sphere, nice and simple. I'll make that a root, which should be perfectly fine. Yeah, I think that's fine. Actually, I'm just going real quick. Set actor scale 3D. I'm just gonna set this to like a solid 0.1 all around. Okay, perfect. And I don't think we need to do anything to our projectile movement. I think this, oh no, it doesn't have an initial speed. We'll just do 1,000, max speed of 1,000. I think that's all fine. Perfect. I'm not gonna worry about any collisions with this. I just wanna have something that'll fire off, and that's gonna be about it. So now over here in our spawn projectile, what I'm going to do, I meant to add a plus there, projectile class, okay? And let me create a projectile, debug projectile, we'll create a class reference, okay? And I'm actually gonna move this right here to the top and make that public. Perfect. So what we're going to do is here in the spawn projectile, first thing we're gonna do is we're going to check to see if this is valid. If this is, what we're going to do is I'm going to create, can I rename that? I cannot, okay. Let's create an arrow component over here. And projectile spawn location, awesome. And I'm just going to move this right over here to the tip of the gun. That should be fine. And just turn that 90. And then what we can do is come over here and spawn projectile, and we can simply just spawn an actor from class. That'll be it. We'll grab our projectile spawn, location, get world transform, and then always spawn ignore collisions. I don't think we need to do anything else there. Actually, I'm gonna rename this to projectile spawn arrow. Okay, keep it nice and simple. Now, if this is not valid, I'm going to assume that we wanna basically just do a hit scan. So what we're going to do in that case is we're going to come down here, we're going to do a line trace, not by channel, we're gonna do a line trace for objects. I'll put that on the is not valid there. And the start location is, again, we're going to grab our projectile spawn arrow, get world location. Perfect, we'll feed that in there. We're also going to want to get our forward vector. Multiply this by, I'm actually curious, I've never, yeah, I guess not. Okay, so I'm actually going to instead do this. We're going to create a new variable over here. Max hit scan distance. We'll move this right on up here. I'm going to make that a float, also public, and I need a default value for this as well. I know it's gonna cause an error for 1 second here. I'll make a default value of, let's say 5,000. I think that's more than enough. Okay, and we'll put that in there. Our get world location, we're going to add that to that multiplied value here. So pass that in there, and then that's going to go into our end. So we should have something that looks a little like that. This is obviously causing an issue right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to promote this again to a variable. I'll go and move hit scan objects. Actually, I should probably put this into a different category. I'm going to put this under hit scan. Hit scan. Hit scan, perfect. I'm going to make that public. And then hit scan objects, we want this to have some default values. I usually start with at least world static. You can do world dynamic if you want. I think the default cube I have in here might be world dynamic. It is dynamic, I believe. Yeah, world dynamic. And then I also like to usually do a pawn. Generally speaking, world static is going to be anything in the world that does not move. World dynamic will be anything in the world that does move, but isn't necessarily like an object. And pawn is typically going to be any sort of actor or anything that we might have in the world. That can be things like our enemies, it can be a player. Static and dynamic will generally cover the environment, so we can't shoot through the environment, and things like that. So nice and simple. The rest of this is generally kind of up to you. Trace complex I wouldn't really recommend unless it's necessary, like you have a lot of really complex terrain. Actors to ignore, we don't need to do any of that. We can do the player if we want, but I'm going to leave that alone for now. Draw a debug type we don't need to worry about, and ignore self is kind of a given. Those are just kind of more debug values. Perfect. Now, assuming that we do hit something, I'm going to break this hit results. And then we're going to, I believe blocking hit means that we hit something. Yes. No. Actually, I'll just pass through the return value. And then if we come down here, I just want to spawn like something simple. So let me do this. I'm going to come over here and I'm actually going to create, not under blueprints actually, I'm going to create a new section here. I'm going to create a new folder here called effects. And then I'm just going to create a Niagara system. We'll keep this nice and simple. I don't want this to be anything too difficult. So maybe I'll do just like a confetti burst or something like that. I'll do a confetti burst. No, we'll do an omnidirectional. No, because I want something that I can clearly see. We'll do confetti burst, okay? Save all, save selected. Let me just make sure that this does in fact work. And I want this, that it does only emit once. Okay, you can see it there. I don't know if it's very clear in the video, but hopefully it should be clear when we actually start firing this. Perfect. And I'm just going to call this hit effect. Perfect. I'll go through and probably redo that later. Spawn system at location. Okay, so spawn system at location. System template. Okay, I think that should work fine. But what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to promote this to variable. Again, it can be something that we can change later on if we want. Hit effect. Perfect. And I'm just going to set like a default value here. So that's set to hit effect by default. Perfect. And then the location is going to be our location, and then rotation and scale shouldn't really matter. That's going to be up to the system itself. We do of course want auto destroy, we want auto activate. Pooling method, I don't think we need to do anything there. Perfect. So this has been quite a bit, but that should now allow for us to fire off our weapon and simply be able to use it. So I'm going to pop on my headset and we'll see how this ends up working. Okay, so I made a few small little mistakes, one of which was just something that I had forgotten, but all of our projectiles are working. I'll show you the changes in a second, but basically, I think I've explained the way that I've ranged this down. We got our single, our burst fire, our automatic, and then this one is going to be our projectile. So let's start from the right and I'll move our way down since I'm here at the projectile. Projectile is working as you would expect. It is spawning projectiles. This one worked perfectly fine. There was no issues with this one. Obviously, we're going to need to despawn the projectiles and all that, but we'll get to that in the next video. Next, we have our automatic. Automatic, if I hold down our trigger, we get a bunch of confetti spawned all over. It stops when I release the trigger. And it should also, I didn't actually test this part, but I think if I just release it, it should stop as well. I didn't really point it at anything, but let me see if I can, there we go. Oh yeah, I mean, it did seem to stop at least. Yep, that stopped. Perfect. Burst fire, you could see it, hopefully you can kind of see it's like spawning a few little confetti bursts. I have it set currently to 3, and this was actually one of the things I screwed up. I did screw up the burst fire on our confetti cannon here. And then finally, we have our single fire, which you can see is a little bit less than what our burst fire is. And the burst fire is firing off at 0.01 seconds, so it happens pretty quickly. I don't actually know if that's quite accurate to the way that guns work in a lot of the other games, but that's the way it works here. Perfect. All right, let me go ahead and quit this and take off the headset real quick so I can show you those changes. Okay, so there were a few things that I did kind of screw up when I was going through our interaction, basically. So on interact end, that remained entirely the same. Over here, I changed the, you might remember originally we were using the set timer by function name. I don't quite know why I was thinking that, but set timer by event works just as well. This is what I was thinking of, and for some reason, I guess my mind just wasn't connecting the dots. So set timer by event, you create an event. It's quite simple. In case you haven't done this before, just set timer by event, create event, and then you're just gonna hit this little drop down and you'll wanna find that spawn projectile function. But everything else is connected the same way. We've passed our fire delay into the time on both, set both up for looping and the max once per frame. The return values still go into the timer, so all of that still remains the same. Nothing else was changed here. The spawn projectile function, for the burst fire, I forgot to actually make the burst fire stop. So what I've done here, I've created two variables, the burst loop num, which is basically whatever the maximum number of bursts we can have. We have our burst loop current, which is set to 0. These are both integers, and I've only set the burst loop num to be public. You might still see the burst loop current. Actually, I can set that to private. We'll set that to private. We don't actually need that visible. But what we do, so this is all occurring before we hit this projectile class, checking the is valid. So before we begin all that, we come down here in the spawn projectile. We're first checking to see if we're running burst. You can pass this by if you really want to. It really doesn't make any of a difference. It's just kind of an unnecessary thing to do if you're doing automatic or single fire. So if we are not doing burst, I'm basically bypassing all that and we are going straight into the projectile class. Nothing more is being done. If we are running burst, we increase the number on our burst loop current, and then we check to see if it is greater than or equal to our burst loop num. So we're checking to see if whatever current number in the burst cycle we are, so if we fire to the first burst or to the second, we're comparing that to whatever the limit is supposed to be. If we haven't hit that limit yet, again, we're bypassing everything and just going straight to spawning our projectile or the hit scan, whatever the case may be. If we did hit that limit, we come down here and we set burst loop current back to 0. We're basically resetting our burst, so that way we're set up for the next one. And then we clear and invalidate the timer handle, so that way we actually stop running this function altogether. So it's nice, it's simple, it's not overly complicated. This was just something that I had forgotten about. I was so focused on projectile versus the hit scan that I had completely forgotten that we still need to add in the burst. With that, we now have our shooter set up, so we are now able to actually start firing at the things that we see in the world. In the next video, we're gonna start taking this a step further by actually having our projectiles despawn, actually having our hit scan and our projectiles deal damage. And I also want to start experimenting with certain modifications that we can add on to the projectiles, as well as the guns, such as little elemental effects and things like that. With that, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next reality.